Okay, good to see all of you.
Recording.
Okay, well, let's begin. I want to welcome all of you to this virtual meeting of the Granbury Stamp Group. Looks like those of us in Granbury are Gary McNamee and myself. But
Wow.
Jim Bailey, I see you joined us, Jim.
And Fred.
Oh, and Fred. There's Fred. Great, Fred. Fred, believe it or not, Jim Bailey's name's under your picture.
I see that, and I don't know why.
I don't either, but
that's my fault. That's my fault.
Shame on you, Rick.
I don't know why I put your name down here. What's your last name, Fred?
Eckenstein. E-K-E-N.
Eckenstein.
you have control of that stuff?
E-K-E-N-S-T-A-N.
Okay, Fred, welcome.
I'm
Good
glad to
see
be
you.
here.
Let's start with a show and tell. Fred, have you got anything to show us this week or tell us about?
I do. I've got a cover here that I've been searching for a while, and in looking for something else today, I found where I had put it. It's canceled in March 6th of 1862, and it's a 64B variety, the rose pink, and I need to get a certificate on it, but I was glad to come across it again today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Judy, have you got anything for show and tell? How about Stan?
Nope.
Nothing? Gary?
Handed.
Gary, you're on mute. Have you got anything for show and tell? Gary, you're muted.
Okay. No, I don't have anything for show and tell, except that I did get some stuff from the last ISWSC auction that came in a month or so ago, and just now tried to start putting it into my collection. So I also bid on something for the October auction, and I'm waiting to see whether any of those are gonna show up or not. That's all I have.
Thank you, Gary. Rob, anything for show and tell? I know you got the program, which we'll do in a little while.
Well, I have a lot of stuff that I'll show in the program. That's good. Nothing much is going around here as far as stamps is concerned, other than me putting this together.
Okay, thank you in advance already. Debbie, anything for show and tell?
Nope.
All right, Skip.
Well, no, I don't have anything for show and tell, but I do have a question for the group. I've been working on topical packets, US stamps, giveaway packets for the beginners section. And I've got, and I'm wondering if there's any categories that I've left out here that you think I should include. I've got flowers, animals and insects, lighthouses, space, sports, transportation, scouting and youth, science and engineering, conservation and ecology, entertainment, which includes a lot of that Hollywood things of the recent stamps, architecture, education and learning, bicentennial, and of course, territory and statehood anniversaries, of which the US started with those very early when they started issuing commemoratives. And so that's the category that has the most stamps. But can you think of anything I've left out or just offhand?
Did you say sports?
I said sports.
Okay.
Dinosaurs.
There aren't that many. I can't put together US stamps of dinosaurs. There aren't that many.
Yeah.
And except for like they issued a packet, you know, this year, but I don't have any of those stamps used yet. So
How about dogs, cat, and birds?
yeah, I've got that under animals and insects.
Okay.
Sounds like a good list, Skip. Thanks for all your work putting that together.
Well, it's kind of fun. I enjoy
Did a
it.
great job.
All right, Rick, anything for show and tell?
And not this time, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Ken Aldridge.
Yes, I've had a couple of really interesting shipping experiences lately. I sold a medium priority box full of albums or stock to a guy in Australia. I did all the research I could, and it looked like it was going to cost $50. I give it to the post office, and it's $86.
Woo.
So the other thing is, it was because it was over 4 pounds, is what he said. I don't know. The other thing is, about 2 weeks ago, over 2 weeks ago, I sold 5 binders of all my U.S. used to a guy in Florida, and he just texted me he still hasn't got them, and they were sent in 2 medium priority box. It was cheaper to send them in 2 boxes than a large one, and he still doesn't have them. And every day I check the post office tracking, and it says in transit, in transit. I mean, I know we're in a period of COVID, but 2 weeks to Florida, it just seems kind of strange.
I can beat that. In
For priority.
April, I made all these masks and I sent them out. My parents live in Peyton, Colorado, which is only maybe 10 minutes from Colorado Springs, where my brother lives. My parents got theirs like in a week. My brother and his family still have not received their mask. It's still in transit, and it's been there since April.
Probably being worn by a postal worker. Here's just an envelope I got from our illustrious secretary. I think he's in violation of federal law here. Can you see that?
Yeah, ripped off stamps.
This is how I received it. The Jackie Robinson stamp is not canceled at all, and the other 2 stamps are ripped.
Okay, they weren't ripped when I put them on there.
Judy,
yeah.
quit using trash stamps.
Uh-huh.
Basically, it's kind of it's the worthless.
Stan.
Yeah. That's all I got.
You can.
Don't feel bad, Judy. You'll see plenty of ripped revenues in my car.
Okay. All right, anybody else with a show and tell? Let's go to announcements. Speaking of announcements, the first topic I'd like to address is the Expo update. There was a good update in the newsletter. I guess, Judy, you put that together, did you, Judy?
No. Skip did
I
that.
don't need,
Oh, pardon, Debbie?
I didn't do anything.
No, Skip put the article together.
Oh,
for-
Skip put it together. Thank
Okay.
you, Skip. Is there anything to add to it? I won't repeat everything that's in the newsletter.
No, that's all that's in there is all the news there is to say, as I used to say on Laugh In. Nothing new since.
And Debbie, am I correct in interpreting it that there will not be a banquet of any type?
As far as I know, I think they said there was no banquet.
Okay. All right.
That's correct.
I knew you were going to play a role in it. So,
No.
no? Oh, I thought I saw your name associated with it. Sorry. And,
I just show up to eat if it's there.
okay. Critical point. Also in the newsletter is the Mid-Cities election of officers. Thank you, Stan and Judy, for running. Thank you, Rick, for running. I don't think there were any of the other, oh, and Skip, thank you. The 4 of you have all agreed to run for an office, and we appreciate the support. Sorry I was not able to get a representative from Granbury to run,
We are too.
but appreciate you doing it.
I threw my
And,
name in for director too.
Pardon?
I threw my name in for board of directors.
Oh, did you? I didn't note that, Ken, but thank you very much.
But
Appreciate that.
it said there's 3 and you have to vote for 3. So what if nobody votes for? My wife said you better vote for yourself or you won't get elected.
That's right. I do see your name now. Ken, I didn't pay attention to it. Appreciate you serving as well.
No problem. Looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Well, anything more about the election that we need to mention? All right, I'm going to ask Gary. Gary, have you got a where in the world is it for us?
I do. This country issued its first stamp in 1937. It was an overprint on a George V stamp. And the stamp that was overprinted was originally from India. The denomination of many of the stamps is Annas, A-N-N-A-S.
Pakistan?
Man,
No, not Pakistan.
Afghanistan?
No.
Nope.
The first, pardon?
Ceylon.
No. The first non-overprinted stamp appeared in 1938 with the actual country name on it. There were no stamps issued from 1940 to 1945 for probably a fairly obvious reason.
We're talking India?
Pardon?
Burma?
Yes, Burma.
All right, good for you.
I was going to give you a couple of other hints. One of them was that they used military overprints in 1945, and there was an interim government in 1947, and a lot of their stamps say Union of Burma, and of course the country changed its name in 1990 to become Myanmar. So anyway, it was Burma.
Thank you, Gary. Who got that correct?
Dan,
Rob did.
Stan. Very good, Stan. I heard the answer, but I couldn't tell who said it.
I thought Rob did.
All right, great. Is there any other business or things we need to discuss before we turn the program over to Rob?
Nada.
right.
After the program, we'll stop recording, and once you call the meeting, then we'll stop recording and have a free for all. You guys can stay on and chat or do whatever you want to, as long as you want to. It's fine with me. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, Rob, it's all yours.
All right.
Okay, let me start sharing a screen here. Post disabled participant screen sharing. I need Rick to do something for me. Post disabled participant screen sharing. Can you hear me, Rick?
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know. I didn't know I did that. All right, hang on a second. I think I know how to do that. It says you're unable to do that. Can you share your screen now?
Post disabled participant screen sharing.
not yet.
It's not disabled, actually.
Well, I'm going to email you a copy of this deck. How's that sound, Rick?
Hang on.
Is that possible workaround? Press Alt to show or hide meeting controls. Post disabled participant screen sharing. Well, I'm emailing you this as a workaround if that's possible. Rick Howell at youroutlook.com.
Yeah, that'll work. Okay, can you try it now, Rob?
Okay. Aha,
Yep.
there we go.
Okay. I figured it out.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can see it.
It says revenue stamps, collecting revenue stamps across the top. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Anyway, this is my, I had a goal at the beginning of the year to do at least 2 presentations or articles to give something back to philately. This is my second one, so I made my goal. It was a fairly light one to make this year. But anyway, this is, well, it's more of my philatelic memoirs like my worldwide collecting was, but actually I spent a lot more time playing with revenues, but I still collect everything, so they are all over the place. I'm just starting out with a couple of screens here. These are all United States revenues, federals of all types. And the next screen, these are all tax-paid revenues and state revenues of all types. I meant to have my chat window open somewhere, so if you had a question, I could see it. I don't know where I can chat. I don't see my chat window right now.
I can speak up.
They just speak up if you, a lot of people are muted, so they can't speak up, but there'll be an opportunity at the end for questions. I'll stop sharing and I'll see you speaking or trying to speak. Okay.
Well, Rob, before you go any further on
Yeah.
that first set of stamps that you showed, one of them had, like 2 holes poked in them.
Right, that's just a normal usage. If you're only familiar with postage stamps, one of the neat things about setting this here is you will see a lot of things that you've never seen before. A lot of things that perhaps you don't think are stamp collecting, and I get that a lot, and I'll talk about it to some length. But that's a normal standard document cancellation.
Okay.
And depending on what it was, this might have been used on a passenger ticket, and the conductor punched those holes.
Oh, okay.
There are all kinds of proprietary cancellation devices in the first, second, third issue revenues that do weird things to the paper, like cut herringbones or scrape a hole in one direction and a circle in the middle or a star in the middle. Lots of strange cancellations you can study and collect and write articles about.
Okay, thank you.
But if anybody has a question, Debbie's got the chat window, and she will tell me if you put something in. Basically, I have 3,000 scanned images of my revenue stamps, and which is not all of them by any means, but I just grabbed them as the mood, stirred me, and added them to these screens to make points.
But you won't see 3,000 tonight.
No. If you see anything that is of interest to you, just ask a question, like Judy did. Perfect. These images were just sized and moved around in an artistic fashion that appealed to me. They are not, they don't have the right size in relation to each other necessarily. Okay.
Rob, a question about
Sure.
that image you have there. You have a handbook up in the upper left-hand corner of
Right.
Cinderella stamps. Now, aren't Cinderella stamps a different category from revenue, and revenues aren't considered Cinderella, are they?
No, well, they're not to me. It depends who you talk to. To many people, a tax-paid revenue, a revenue which is not listed in the Scott catalog, is a Cinderella. I define a Cinderella as something that is not issued by a government for some official purpose. It's issued by a private party, an organization, a charity. If it's issued by a government, it's a revenue. So tax-paid revenue is a revenue, not a Cinderella. But Sherwood Springer put these things together that he loved to collect, and he had his 10 different editions of his catalog, and that's what he called it, Cinderella Stamps and Tax Paid Revenues. Later on, you'll see some images from the of tax paid revenues from the issued by the U.S. Department Superintendent of Documents. Most people wouldn't consider them tax paid revenues. You see, they didn't come from the IRS or its predecessors. It was issued by a government for an official purpose. To me, that's a revenue stamp. You're jumping ahead of us, but yeah, Cinderella stamps is another topic. To me, that is something not issued by a government. Everybody is going to have their own study things and decide how you're going to categorize what you collect on your own. To be a revenue collector, you need to be a little bit of a rebel. You know, you're on the dirt roads. You got a four-wheeler. You're not traveling with the herd by any means. I'm channeling Roger Dangerfield here. The revenue collector, when he goes around from dealer to dealer asking for revenues, he doesn't get a lot of respect a lot of times. It's getting better over the years, but for a long, long time, that's how he felt. I walked up to a Bourse dealer and he says, "Oh, we only deal in philatelic items here. Revenue stamps aren't philatelic items." I'm sorry, it's revenue philately, it's Cinderella philately, it's all philately. But that's me. If you have different feelings, that's fine. We will not agree on that. I put these images here. These are tax paid revenues that paid tax on tobacco from the series of 1868. I was really gratified in the first week or so of the APS stamp checks to see a presentation from the research and articles written by Peter Schwartz talking about these early tobacco tax paid revenues as the first depictions of African Americans on United States stamps. And he made the point that in his researchers with historians that wasn't no great honor for these African American gentlemen to be depicted like this, with earrings and with ludicrous expressions on their faces and laboring in the fields in rough clothing. That's a stereotype. That's a box. That's a cage the white man put them in. And what I'm trying to say is, no matter how beautiful they are, these stamps seldom get a lot of respect. That's why I chose to put them here. Revenue stamps often, their popularity is limited because the categories of taxation are unpopular or not socially acceptable. Tobacco products, cigarettes down here at the bottom, beer here, more tobacco products. I would say that these prostitution stamps here in the upper corner, not socially acceptable. And these local issues here, these two Italian local issues and a French postal tax stamp would actually have been on a letter, and a postal historian might treasure it because it is an obligatory tax stamp. But it's not going to be listed in the Scots because it's strictly local to Barcelona. Okay, but it's a revenue stamp, revenue on postage in this case. Many postal tax stamps are listed by Scott in their world catalog as postal tax, but only if they were obligatory across the administration. So there's a lot of unpopular types of these stamps. I like dogs, but not everybody wants to collect dog license stamps. It's just not a popular topic.
They need a dog.
They need a dog on them. That's kind of unusual. So you won't get a lot of respect. You won't get a lot of popularity. You won't have a lot of people, hanging on your every word with a lot of these types of stamps. Another issue is that they often come in very challenging formats. This you might not even call a stamp. You might say that that's a stock certificate or something. It measures 14 by 9 inches. Requires a very big page to mount it on. Here you can see I've got these cigar strips mounted on blank pages that are 11 by 22 inches wide. These are 17-inch long cigar strips. This is the tobacco tax stamp of 1862 that Peter Schwartz was mentioning. These are the very first depiction, like the one I showed 2 screens above, is the next one, of Black Americans on a U.S. postage stamp. I just took a snapshot with my camera. It's very fuzzy, but here you see sleighs working in a field. I had planned on taking these out, and I ended up making a little rip trying to get it out of the mouth. These are very fragile because they've been folded many times. So they're kind of hard to manipulate, and they're very subject to damage. I actually have this full set of 1862, but none of them are in perfect condition, even though they're not used. Another issue is if you don't like dealing with self-adhesive stamps, modern self-adhesive stamps, unusual gums and formulations and paper print that they might be produced on are not paper, cellophane, plastic, tin foil, copper, brass. A lot of these stamps are not amenable to collecting in the same way that you collect typical postage stamps. This is an 1987 Washington State salmon stamp, and you can see that the gum, self-adhesive gum, has totally crystallized. It's fallen off the license, and I've had to hinge it back on. But these self-adhesive stamps started in the revenue world in the 50s. The pressure-treated decals on cellophane, which are so hard to collect because they flake and disintegrate, they started in the 30s. So these challenging formats are very common in revenue collecting. So I'm just rambling here, showing you pictures. What is a revenue stamp? I'm going to show you I'm going to an authority here, the Revenue Society of Great Britain. They define a revenue stamp is a stamp, whether impressed, adhesive, or otherwise, issued by or on behalf of an international, national, or local government, their licensees or agents, and indicate that a tax, duty, or fee has been paid or prepaid, or that permission has been granted. A lot of verbiage there, but it's all inclusive, essentially all inclusive. When it says their licensees or agents, I take that to mean most telegraph stamps. Here in the United States, the license and land grants were issued to dozens of companies to run telegraph lines. To me, those are telegraph stamps. To other collectors and other revenue collectors, those telegraph stamps are a separate category. I call them all revenues because they were issued by a government or a government's agent or licensee. Someone granted a right to do that, and used for a legitimate purpose for society that government wanted to have done. I tend to shorten this to say, issued by any government for an official purpose. Cinderella would not be issued by a government. Questions, comments? Anyway, the big point to take away here is that you decide what is a revenue and what you want to collect. It is at least as diverse as the postage stamp world. And if you look at this definition very, very carefully, guess what? Postage stamps are Johnny-come-lately, 220 years late to the ballpark, tiny subcategory of revenue stamps, because postage stamps are issued by a government to prepay something. So they're all revenue stamps. That's my take on it. You won't agree. I'm not expecting it to. Okay, what I'm depicting here is a discussion thread posted to my favorite stamp collecting social media site, stampboards.com. Someone was asking the question, why did people stop collecting revenue stamps 100 years ago? That seems to be true. Up till about 1920, revenue stamps were much more popular. You see them in old albums. They were in catalogs alongside postage stamps. And this whole thread of about 2 pages speculates on it. None of the contributors to that thread come up with my theory. My theory, now here's an example of an old, this is not 100 years old, this album page, but my point I'm trying to make is, if you're a dealer, if you see old collections, old beginner collections, old intermediate collections, the older the collection is, the more revenue stamps you find in it. Here in this stamp, it's supposed to be United States postage. All the spaces are supposed to be for postage, but this relatively unsophisticated collector, he's only got 1, 2, 3, 4 postage stamps in here. everything else is a revenue stamp. You got a wine, you got first, second, and third issue revenue stamps. So the older collection that you page through is, the more you'll see revenue stamps in it. Okay. My theory is that everything changes when there's a big war. Everything changes. Revenue stamps came into the homes and into the lives of every American citizen with our Civil War. And you'll see that in some of my other issues. And they were in everybody's home. Everyone who ever wrote a check or had a business transaction, even a sale, and they got a receipt back, you know, they saw these revenue stamps and had to use them. Here I've got the proprietary set of the Spanish-American War, the battleship set. They're one of my favorite sets. But in an old collection, 100 years old, you will see these all over the place, both the proprietary and the documentary. This is the Canadian War Tax stamp from the World War I. This is the last worldwide catalog published that tried to cover the entire world of revenues in a single volume. Forbin. No attempt has been made to catalog all the revenue stamps, even in a simplified way, in a single volume or even multiple volumes, by any company since 1915. I believe, and my theory is that World War I changed the world in a lot of different ways. One way was postage stamps started becoming issued. There were a lot of new political entities following World War I. You know, all the little Balkan countries, and the existing countries all started issuing a lot of commemoratives very quickly, including celebrating the end of World War I. The number of stamps being issued worldwide ballooned. And I believe that I'm using the term redlining. I tend to equate how I am treated as a revenue collector by postal snobs, you know, the postal privilege guys, in terms of race relations. I'm using the term redlining. Redlining is a discriminatory practice where neighborhoods have red lines drawn across them, and you don't invest in there because the wrong kind of people live in there. Postal missions proliferated in the 1920s. There was no longer space in albums or catalogs for fiscals. They kept the good stamps, the postage stamps, and kicked everybody else out of the albums and the catalogs. And that's a claim that not original to me. You find it in several places. You can research on the internet. I asked the APRL to substantiate a Wikipedia claim about this redlining practice. That's what I call it. And Marcia Garman found this from a Stanley Gibbons improved postage stamp album, 32nd edition, 1963. From the 20s through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, a new stamp collector or an intermediate album would often have something to this effect. Since philately is the collecting of stamps that are employed in connection with the posts, do not put into your album fiscals, telegraph stamps, tobacco tax labels, and other strange things, as are often found in some collections. You know, that kind of justified kicking all kinds of stuff out of their printed albums, pre-printed albums, and out of their catalogs. Postal stationery got kicked out. Revenues got kicked out. If you look at an 1890 stamp album, pre-printed stamp album, it would have printed spaces for the first issue revenues if it was a U.S. album. That was gone by 1920. So you kind of get the feeling that I do not approve of people who feel that philately is postage only. It never has been, and it should not be. We shouldn't be so exclusive in our definitions. What you see here is I have the whole stack behind me. This is all of my revenue resources I use all the time, piled on a table. You can see barefoot catalogs. This book up here, Collecting and Displaying Revenue Stamps in the Upper Left by Clive Ackerman. If I pique your interest, that would be a good place to answer questions authoritatively. How to collect revenue stamps. I kind of paged through that before I put this together to make sure I wasn't missing anything important. I tend to use the Barefoot catalogs, John Barefoot catalogs. Most of the world is now covered in his catalogs, but he's not very specialized. I really preferred my Italian revenue catalog by Yvette and Teller French, Australian colonies for Australian stamps. Those specialized catalog stamps, just like our Scott US specialized, they go into a lot more depth. I really prefer them, but if you have nothing else other than a simplified catalog that Barefoot puts out, that's great. I should point out that many of these, over here you see a Sakura. Sakura does a good job of listing Japanese revenues and telegraph stamps. Of course, I can't read it, but I get something out of it. There are many, many online catalogs, price lists, and checklists that you can get you have to get a depth, but you can identify things. When I'm organizing my revenues of the world, for example, I'm essentially just trying to figure out what type of tax it's paying and how it was used, when it was issued, basic questions so I know what stamps to group with which stamps, and what order to put them in on my blank pages. If you're not into blank pages, I do still use an addendum for the Scott National album for revenue pages. It has not been republished very often. This one is published in 1983. On a regular basis, every decade, there are several new categories of revenue stamps that get added to the Scott catalog. In my lifetime, for example, we've had beer stamps have been added.
Can you put the collecting and displaying book title in the chat?
The chat area is going to be, collecting and displaying revenue stamps by Clive Ackerman. I'd be more than happy to borrow that, loan that to anybody who would like to see it. I do want it back. Debbie will put that in for you. Anyway, here you can see the Scott National Revenue pages that are published by Scott for the revenue section of the U.S. Scott Specialized. It doesn't include stuff that's been added since 1983, like beer stamps, or state duck stamps, or non-pictorial duck stamps, all of which are Scott listed at this point. Here you can see my unconstitutional stamps, potato tax stamps. That would make another really nice presentation if you want to hear about potato tax stamps. The use of these were issued in order to keep potato farmers from growing surplus potatoes, kind of the price support. It was struck down as illegal by the Supreme Court. The courts and the precedents of courts dating all the way back to the Whiskey Rebellion in George Washington's time, they kind of frown upon any law which has the potential to destroy anything. The power to tax is the power to destroy. That's our first Supreme Court Justice, John Jay, I think his name was, who said that. And the courts threw these out as unconstitutional. FDR got slapped by his Supreme Court on those, and they were only ever sold to collectors. But they are beautiful. That's an aside. Just about anything you see in here, whether it's a whole category of stamps, you want to hear about documentaries or proprietaries or revenues of Great Britain or Japan, I can probably put together a 15-20 minute talk on any of them at any time. Well, at a week's notice, let's put it that way. Over here you see, this is not published by Scott, but it is designed to go behind the Scott revenue page section. This is for private proprietaries. I don't have that many of them. They're hard to find. Like all proprietary stamps, they're very, very hard to find, even cheap ones in good condition. Proprietary stamps, you might not know, and I will go over it more, but they're designed to be destroyed. That's how they're canceled. So they're kind of hard to find in good condition. But there's a pre-printed album pages designed to work with national albums for the private proprietaries. It is not very specialized. It doesn't list or provide stamps for all the paper types, for example. But I use those. I also use the stampalbums.com pages for those types of Scott listed revenues which have been added to the Scott catalog since 1983, like the beer stamps. And I love to put documents and to show usage on quadrille blank pages right in my national albums, where I display my Scott listed revenues. This is just a 2-cent Civil War first issue revenue, showing the tax on 2-cent tax on every bank check you wanted to write. This is a screen I lifted from my Collecting Everything presentation back in January. Same screen, it didn't change anything. It just shows more pictures I could talk about. Kansas quail stamps, I've got all of them. Lock seals, well, those aren't tax stamps, but I call them tax pays because they're issued by a government for some official purpose. They would have used these in a specially designed lock to seal the warehouses where liquor was being stored, waiting to be assessed for taxation. And they knew that every lock can be picked. They would put this in there, and no one could pick that lock or get into that lock without showing evidence of tampering, breaking the paper seal. They're beautiful. They're printed by the same companies that printed our postage stamps or other revenue stamps, and they're very unusual. I like the unusual, if you haven't figured that out. This over here, this gray block of 50-pound stamps, those are the tax-exempt potato stamps that went along with the potato stamps, Pretty Lady. These were given to every farmer of potatoes up to a set amount. He could grow 8,000 pounds of potatoes, say, on his acres without paying the potato tax stamp. He would be given these 50 pounds tax-exempt stamps or whatever, and put those on his shipping tags. And over and above that limit, when he ran out of these stamps, he'd have to pay the exorbitant tax worth more than potatoes were worth on those shipping tags after that, above that. So these were actually used before the Supreme Court struck those potato stamps down. Snuff stamps, a beautiful allegorical figure here. Stamp for imported wine, malt, liquors, beautiful steamship here. I haven't mentioned it, but there is topical interest, or should be, in revenue stamps. That is kind of diminished by the fact that you cannot have a topical class exhibit with including revenue stamps. You might be able to get away with it in a display class exhibit, but an actual topical thematic display is against the rules to include revenue stamps. So it doesn't matter if you wanted to have a topical display, a thematic display of this particular type of steamship, and this is the perfect image of it, it wouldn't fit for some reason. I do appreciate postal history, but I love fiscal history. I have hundreds of documents in my binders. This one is just first issue revenue stamp. You remember how I said with the Civil War came revenue stamps into every household. This certificate is a certificate stamp on a certificate of disability, what a revenue collector, a U.S. revenue collector, would call a matching usage. It is not an early matching usage. It's dated August 14th, 1865. First issue revenue stamps were required by law in early August 1861, shortly after the Civil War began and the debt started piling up. But stamps could not be prepared and produced until the first few weeks of October. They were issued in I think, well, I numbers not off the top of my head, but in many categories, 60 categories or so: certificates, insurance, all these different types of documents that had specific rates applied. 10 cents for $1,000, whatever. A certificate would have had 5 cents, for any certificate. So an early matching from October 1861 until people figured out that the requirements of the law were totally unworkable. They were lucky to get any stamp whatsoever on any document. On December 25th, I can only remember it because it's Christmas, December 25th, 1861, that requirement to have the right kind of revenue stamp on the right kind of document was done away with one exception, was done away with And you could use these first issue revenue stamps on any type of documentary transaction. That's why in the second and third issues, they just say U.S. Internal Revenue. And most of the first issue revenues you see, just you know, many of the low values just say just a plain old USIR stamp or the bank check stamp. But anyway, it's very nice to find a certificate stamp on a certificate, even if it's not an early matching usage. But anyway, the point of this showing you this document is that, you know, I know people love studying the post office and how routes and rates work, but to me, it is extremely fascinating to study fiscal documents because they show so much of real history of all types. In the Civil War, of course, there's a lot of draft had to be implemented. Rich men could pay people to take their place in line in the before the draft board. And if you wanted to claim a medical disability, you go see the examining surgeon and you'd get him to give you a certificate of disability if you happen to have a club foot, like this gentleman. Clem M. Evans was unable to serve. He needed to get one of these certificates, cost him 5 cents every year, and he had to appear before his draft board until the draft expired. Anyway, this is part of the history of the Civil War, and I have hundreds of different little pieces of history of the Civil War. Well, I shouldn't say hundreds. You know, many of those documents are after 1865. Just because the Civil War ended, of course, does not mean the taxes not discontinued. The government still had $2.7 billion worth of debt. That sounds like nothing today. So those taxes never went away. They just changed format. Here are some more Scott listed revenues of all types. I like this little document here. This is just a receipt for a mail order shipment of worth $86. I don't know what it is. The letter advertises what other goods he has for sale and the prices. But every receipt of any kind required a 2-cent tax stamp. Every time I do a transaction at the store and they ask me if I want a receipt, it makes me think of this. In the Civil War, if a kid was sent in by his parents to buy a piece of penny candy, did he also have to pay 2-cent tax to get his receipt? I have a feeling there were a lot of transactions that were off the books without receipts. Maybe that's why the clerk was always asking, do I want a receipt? That probably started the Civil War. Here's the same picture of the same document. This would have been intended for bonds, but would have been used on any of the taxes, documented taxes that required a 25-cent stamp or more. This is the second issue, with 1871, where we have a bicolor. Many of these this long series of 30 values, 20 values, I forget. They're all black and blue, and there are a number of them which are inverts. A number of those inverts exist in much fewer quantities than the 100 C3A inverted jennies. But believe me, they don't cost anything like an inverted jenny, but they're just as beautiful to me. The same is true for the third issue. These were much more colorful. Not just blue and black, but each denomination has its own frame color. But they're still all George Washington. I actually like the second and third issue frames a lot better. I like the design is much better. In these issues and revenue stamps until the end of the 30s, they were experimenting with a lot of security features. They had a lot of experimental papers, silk thread papers. These inks faded severely in color, that type of thing. I put this in here. I don't own it. I'm channeling Rick Howell here. I don't necessarily own some of these things, but I will point out when I don't. This is a proof, actually, of the 1768 stamp. It says America on the top, but these stamps very much like it started in 1694 in Great Britain. The British citizens were using them long before the American, in fact, look, colonists did. But this is the infamous Stamp Tax Act of 1694. It was applied to the colonials and actually increased and increased and increased and used on many, many more different paper products that we got tired of. And you learn in grade school, taxation without representation. This is a proof. I don't have that in my collection. You can see one, a nice one on display in the National Postal Museum. Strangely, it's not postal. This is another, this is a proof. I thought I'd throw in an essay. This is an essay produced by a Continental Banknote Company to, be issued for the 1871 issue. Kind of strange. It does say U.S. Internal Revenue, but the central vignette happens to be the state seal of Pennsylvania. They were already printing similar stamps with the same seal and had the vignette all ready to go with the state seal of Pennsylvania. So they just pitched this as a proof for the United States Internal Revenue, probably telling them, oh, we'll put anything in there you want. You want George Washington? No problem. But anyway, these are Scott listed proofs and essays of revenue stamps. Scott listed revenue stamps are listed in the Scott catalog. The reds and greens from the 30s, well, the 40s and 50s, there's no end to those. They were overprinted with a different series number for more than 20 years. They're essentially the same stamps. They come up in very high denominations of many thousands of dollars. But there were used examples are not that expensive. Some are hard to find. There are many, many categories of specific instruments, documents, which would have required specific stamps after 1910 or so. Future delivery, silver tax, stock transfers. All of these here I'm listing as documentary stamps that were required to be affixed to a document signifying that a tax had been paid. And the law said that was required for the document to have any legal standing. This one in the corner, I heard someone tell me that was a proprietary. No, it's not a proprietary stamp. You don't stick that and put it on the stock of your machine gun, your Tommy gun. This has to go on the transfer document signed by your chief law enforcement officer saying that you are a good person and can own a machine gun. In any case, there are more questions?
No.
We'll go on to proprietary stamps. You remember how I said the first issue revenue stamps, they took away the requirement to have the type of stamp match the tax required for a particular type of document. That was done away with in Christmas 1861, with one exception. Many of these titles were for proprietary purposes. Proprietary means you put it on a proprietary product to pay a tax, on a playing card, on a bottle of wine, on a pack of cigarettes, on a keg of beer, on a cigarette tube, on a package of marijuana, on a jar of fermented fruit juice, on a book of matches. The legal requirement to use a proprietary stamp for a proprietary tax remained in force from 1861 on. Okay, and there are many, many classes of proprietary stamps. I think the most beautiful and very varied, of course, are the private die proprietaries, where companies in the Civil War and on paid to have their dies printed by the government, either by the government security printer contract or the Bureau of Engraving and Printing later. They would design the die in the art and have government print them, and they'd get a certain discount per 1,000 stamps off the tax, and they get the advertising for it too. You'll see more of these. I've pictured several before now, but these proprietary die stamps began in 1861, or a little later because it took a while for the companies to get the stamps ready. But you see them for patent medicines of all types, for little liver pills and stuff. Matches, to They called them Lucifers to strike and have a fire. Perfume and playing cards. Am I missing any? I don't think so. Those are the categories. I've read articles over the years about why certain things were taxed, like why were photographs and matches taxed? Sulfur was actually a strategic product. Didn't want it used in frivolous ways, making it expensive for the government to make gunpowder. Silver was a strategic product, silver nitrate and sun photos, so gentlemen could have little pictures made for their girlfriends. That was considered a frivolous use of silver. Much more important for the officers on the battlefield to look pretty in their gold and silver and have it all over the horses they were riding too. I'm just being facetious. Silver was a strategic product. Sulfur was a strategic product. That justified taxes. For some reason, the government loves to justify taxes rather than just say, oh, we're going to tax anything we can, which is what they do. These are tax-paid revenue stamps. When I was first starting out, I was told a tax-paid revenue stamp is a revenue stamp that is not Scott listed, which is basically true. Because over the years, many of them have migrated from my Springer catalogs to the Scott catalog. Beer stamps. Priestley wrote a book on beer stamps, and it was licensed by Scott, and boom, we have the REA stamps in Scott. The same thing happened when Bob Dumaine came out with catalogs of state duck stamps, and David Torres came out with catalogs of non-pictorial duck stamps. All those books, by the way, are in that picture way up there on catalogs. So, you know, tax paid is not a fixed subject. But if I had to tell you why certain stamps, revenue stamps, made the cut into the Scott catalog and certain didn't, the name tax paid kind of gives you a hint. Very often with tax paid revenues, you'll see they're not denominated in dollars and cents. They're denominated in ounces. Tax paid on an ounce of tobacco, a fifth of liquor, a pint of wine. If it's not denominated, or a 1/8 ounce of snuff, if it's not, or 10 pounds of snuff, in this one here, if it's not denominated in dollars and cents, it's often considered a tax paid. But there are lots of exceptions. Beer stamps usually have both. Yes.
I have a question. You got colored oleomargarine and uncolored margarine. And I can see the tax is 10 cents per pound on the colored margarine. And I can't read the tax on the uncolored margarine, but I would presume that they charged you more for adding that little hint of yellow to your goose grease. Am I right?
Well, no, I mean, actually, didn't cost the government anyway. This was the dairy lobby did not like this new technology of fake butter, so they just had to, lobby Congress to tax it to death. And they particularly disliked pretty oleomargarine that was colored like it was really butter. So the tax rate was higher on colored margarine than it was on uncolored margarine. The dairy lobby was very powerful, and you'll see these stamps issued by the states as well. Most of the states that had a dairy industry of any kind. This cigarette stamp was, let's go back. The cigarette stamp with DeWitt Clinton. Arguably, you might think that the most common portrait to appear on United States stamps is George Washington or something like that. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. DeWitt Clinton, Attorney General for the state of New York, definitely has image printed on far more stamps than anybody else over the years. Of course, most of them were thrown away, cigarette wrappers. But anyway, the tax-paid revenues are often beautifully engraved. The cigar strips in particular, some of them are just absolutely stunning, all the scroll work. These two stamps over here that are, say, public documents, a U.S. government printing office, those are receipt stamps and coupons issued to people who were ordering publications from the government. They are not listed in anybody's tax-paid revenue stamp catalog, and most people would say they're not revenue stamps. You're giving somebody a receipt for money they sent in. or you're giving somebody a coupon because you're out of print. They sent their money in and they don't want to cut you a check. They're going to send you these little coupons that you can use in future orders. They're not revenue stamps per se, unless you use my definition that says it's issued by a government for an official purpose. Not all revenue stamps, federal revenue stamps, are issued by the IRS. Many other bureaus and bureaucracies issue them. 8 o'clock. Okay. We're getting there. These are a collection of state and revenue stamps, citrus stamps. Up here in the upper left corner, I've made fun of this stamp and the one I showed earlier, different series, different year, but also Tennessee. I was wondering about the state of math literacy in Tennessee. 5/10 cent. I don't know. I don't think they get fractions. You see some Texas stamps, liquor stamps, stock transfer stamps, District of Columbia, Missouri State Road Fund. That's actually a stock transfer stamp. It's a state road fund. Not unlike our lottery. You buy a lottery ticket, the funds are supposed to go to support education. So they say. You pay your tax on stock transfers in the state of Missouri. It goes to support good roads.
No,
They don't?
the roads are bad in Missouri.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, if you are a topical collector, you might want that for the car. You might like this for the view of a beautiful mountain. I don't know why. I assure you there aren't any mountains in Ohio. I don't think. But in any case, citrus, for the most part, state revenues are not the most beautiful designs, but occasionally you'll find some interesting items. State wildlife stamps. When I was in junior high school, the trend, all my friends, with one exception perhaps, stopped collecting. What kept me active throughout my high school years and beyond were these things. I wanted, if I were to put together a topical exhibit, I would want to do like kingfishers of the world, or the belted kingfisher, one frame exhibit. But unfortunately, a purely thematic display can't include revenues. Go figure. I might be able to get away with a few of them as a display class. But it isn't just the designs and the topics and the interest in the study of whatever stamp you're interested in. Sometimes you just love to have the signature. Please note the signature on this delightful stamp. That's one of my favorite people. That's my wife. Anyway,
That's my fishing stamp.
if you collected bears or ducks, obviously these would have a lot of appeal.
I don't think she's old enough to have had that stamp and been able to legally fish.
No, I don't know.
Oh, you're so sweet.
No,
Dave.
no, she was so young. She didn't really need to even buy a stamp. She just knew I was a collector and wanted to have one. Okay. Revenue stamps of the world. We're almost done here. I do not own this white embossed seal at the top, at the bottom. That is arguably the first stamp in the world. Now, if you go into the National Postal Museum and walk up to their picture of the penny black, it drives me crazy because the sign says the world's first stamp. Of course not. It's the world's first postage stamp. Postage stamp. This little baby down here, a clean Segal from the Netherlands, was first used in 1624, more than 220 years before the penny black. You could fill albums full of, several at least, of stamps worth only a couple bucks. That you only spent less than 10 bucks each, say, on stamps that were issued and used prior to the penny black. Penny black, we still have another 40 years or so to go before postage stamps have been around half as long as revenue stamps. I'll just get that off my chest. The reality is this is probably the first use of a paper stamp where the stamp was printed or embossed on many designs in a single sheet, cut apart and used. That's probably the first example of paper stamp. But the British Museum has 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablets that have a revenue collector's stamp in the bottom corner. So death and taxes and tax stamps probably followed shortly thereafter. I love a lot of the designs here. This Canadian light inspection with the Indian princess and the headdress of lights. This Queensland duty stamp. I just put this in here to show you that if you like to study papers and watermarks, they vary greatly from revenue to revenue. My wife is telling me I've gone way over, but I have to talk about this. This management contract, 1962 management contract signed by the Beatles, okay? And you'll notice it's just Wilding definitive postage stamps. No, there are revenue stamps too. In much of the world, again, like I said, there's no difference between a revenue stamp and a postage stamps. This is probably the grandest and most grandiose use of a common Queen Elizabeth II Wilding stamp ever. This document signed by John Lennon and George Harrison, and well, Ringo Starr didn't sign it. He wasn't the original drummer, but all the others are there. It's sold at Sotheby's for 275,000 British pounds. I know it's not insane, but it's better than any other inexpensive sixpence Wilding definitive has ever done. Indian court fees, Australian hunting stamps, lots of. I put these in here so you can show if you want to do plate varieties or constant plate varieties. There's lots to play with. Here are two more stamps from before the Great Britain. These are newspaper duty stamps, imprints on paper from 1820 in my collection. Italian stamps. Here's a truck if you do transportation. A ship if you do boats. Israel, Cape of Good Hope, Japan. My wife tells me I'm out of time. This is a screen from my last display where I would encourage you, if you really want to know more, look up on your browsers or send me an email as soon as the links. The American Revenue Society here in the United States has a great journal, and so does the State Revenue Society. They publish a great catalog, one volume catalog of most of the state revenue stamps. Where do you get revenues? Society mail bid sales, both of those societies, they have one every issue of the journal. Great place to buy stuff. Bourse dealers. Our own Tom Cunningham has a very good supply of basic revenues of the United States. Jim Myers has everything else. And that's an exaggeration, but he's always surprising me. I'll ask him, I go around to bourses and ask everybody what kind of revenues you got. And he always holds something up just for me, I think. I bought a lot of Canadian revenues from him. I asked him the other day if he had any fiscal cancels on Icelandic postage stamps. I was looking specifically for an import duty tax stamp that's mentioned in the classic Scott U.S. Specialized. For Iceland and some of the Nordic countries, a fiscal cancel is actually worth more under certain circumstances than a postal cancel. So things are improving for us fiscalists. Mail order dealers, you've got Eric Jackson and many others. You've got eBay. Friends and family, like your wife who signs a duck stamp, and my brothers who sign duck stamps.
I'm only signed out fish.
She went fishing too, and she caught more than I did. She always does. I don't remember specifically, but she always catches more than I did. I think it's because I bait her hook for her all the time.
Well, thank you very much, Rob.
Yeah.
Appreciate your presentation.
Let me go back to this. Even if you have any questions or one of these resources, or just have a question, you can email me. And that's all I got.
Okay.
Sorry for going so far over.
Let's give him a hand. Okay, Rick, if you can return us to the normal thing, that'd be great. In closing, it appears we had a couple of folks join us during this. John Withers, I saw your name come up. John, are you with us? And then I saw one that was Galaxy J7V. Who might that be?
I don't know who that was.
That's RD2,
That was somebody that said they were a member.
R2D2.
They said they were a member and they retired to Missouri, so I don't know who that was.
Okay, well, we had a couple join us. We've gone over the hour that I usually limit our meetings to, but very informative and interesting presentation, Rob, and we all thank you for that.
Thank
I'm
you.
so sorry.
Next month's meeting of the Granbury
job, Rob.
group would be on Tuesday, October 27th, and it'll be a virtual meeting as well at 7 p.m. I do not have a program. Is there anybody willing to bring us a program virtually next month?
I have some canned programs from the APS and from YouTube that I can actually share. I can get back with you and talk to you about those if you want to do one of those.
Okay, if no one
Nobody
else
can actually do one.
willing to do one, are there any final words before we turn off the recording?
Thanks, Rob.
Not a problem. I obviously love it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording and I'm gonna turn it over to you guys and have at it.